Hello, and welcome back to our variety show, Azimuth Podcast. Today marks the second anniversary of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and will be the focus of our first segment. Then we will discuss the recruiting woes of the Department of Defense is having, and we will end with a continuation of our 2024 presidential candidate profiles with Ron DeSantis. My name is Kimberly McNabb, and as always, next to me is my husband, Barrett McNabb.
Thanks, Kimberly. Yes, unfortunately today marks the complete incompetence of the Biden administration surrounding the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. I'd like to give our viewers some background. Operation Enduring Freedom, also known as OEF, was the official name given to the U.S. coalition-led military operation initiated after September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. Its primary objective was to dismantle al-Qaeda and deny it a safe haven in Afghanistan by removing the Taliban from power. Here's a brief overview.
The beginning was a post-9/11 response. September 11, 2001. Terrorists hijacked 4 planes, crashing 2 into New York City's World Trade Center towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and the last, United Flight 93, into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers bravely intervened. September 20th, 2001, President George W. Bush addressed Congress, stating that if the Taliban did not hand over Osama bin Laden and other al-Qaeda leaders responsible for the 9/11 attacks, the United States would initiate military action.
So with those initial strikes and ground operations, on October 7, 2001, the U.S. and U.K. launched aerial bombing campaigns against the Taliban and al-Qaeda targets in Afghanistan. In tandem with the bombing campaign, the CIA and Special Forces collaborated with the Northern Alliance, an Afghan opposition group, to combat the Taliban on the ground. By December 2001, the Taliban had lost control of Kabul, and their rule was effectively over in most parts of Afghanistan. Over the prolonged conflict and search for bin Laden, U.S. coalition forces also continued to escalate in fight. While the Taliban regime had been quickly toppled, both Taliban and al-Qaeda elements transformed into an insurgent group and led a prolonged conflict. There are 2 types of battlefields, linear and nonlinear. The linear battlefield is typically used in a high-intensity conflict. The nonlinear battlefield is used in a low-intensity conflict, and they both have support zones, battle zones, and disruption zones. If you can imagine a village in the mountains or a airfield or a camp in Pakistan as their support zone, and as the fighters move out to engage coalition forces, that's the battle zone. The disruption zone is areas where they do reconnaissance and plant IEDs in order to disrupt the movements and actions of coalition forces. The U.S. and coalition forces focused on stabilizing the nation, fighting against insurgent activities, and attempting to establish a functioning Afghan democracy. It was at this time that I deployed to combat as an embedded military advisor to 3rd Kandak 2nd Brigade Afghan National Army. I was a battalion operations, intelligence, and executive advisor. So I was on a 7-person team that was embedded with the Afghan Army in a infantry battalion, or as the Afghan National Army calls it, a Kandak. And there was 16 Americans and 650 Afghan soldiers. And we ate, slept, fought, trained, laughed, cried together. And, really what was supposed to happen is we were going to pull this infantry Kandak or battalion offline and train. And there was nothing happening with that. We had to train on the go. We were engaged in full combat from the moment that we got to the forward operating base in Kalat, Zabul province. And so it was, warfare. I mean, it was guerrilla tactics, insurgent warfare called COIN, counterinsurgency warfare, and it was, very intense. The Afghan troops, the soldiers, were amazing warriors, absolutely amazing warriors, but they were terrible soldiers. And what I mean by that is they had no qualms about running up a hill and bravely assaulting a position by themselves. But usually you're not successful when you do that. You need fire and maneuver. You need a base squad to be laying down. Yep, laying down suppressive fire, and then a maneuver element to maneuver. And so it was really difficult to get this type of concept down, that it's not the individual. It's the team that's going to get it done. And part of the thing that I did with planning operations alongside the operations officer, who's a Afghani major, we would teach them the MDMP, military decision making process, and some of that was very difficult because to the letter of the law of MDMP, as you're developing your courses of action, you do 3 courses of action that you present to the commander. So you plan how to do the operation 3 different ways, and I got pushback, and he said, "Well, why? Why are you doing 3 plans? We're only going to do one of them." And I said, "Well, that's true, but we want to be able to give the commander options." And so it was that kind of resistance to learning doctrine. It is an example. Another example is there was just a lack of predictive analysis for the troops. They would be given a uniform for the winter, a uniform for the summer, so winter boots, gloves, hats. But the thing is it was in the summertime. So they went down to the bazaar and they sold all their winter gear, and they had flip-flops. And then all of a sudden, winter came, and they didn't have their winter gear. And so they're running around in flip-flops with snow on the ground. And they just didn't foresee a lot of what was about to happen. And some of it comes down to a lot of people in the news, and a lot of people and military pundits and things like that said that the Afghanistan is corrupt. Everybody's just absolutely corrupt there. And I would push back a little bit and say it's not necessarily a atmosphere of corruption as it is an atmosphere of survival. And it's very tough there. The terrain is not forgiving. There's really only 2 types of terrain in Afghanistan. In the U.S. Army, when you're doing land navigation, you learn about major terrain and minor terrain. And there's hills, valleys, ridges, depressions, cut, fill, cliff, and those are all terrain features. Afghanistan only has 2. It has uphill or about to go uphill. If you find yourself going downhill, that's only because you're about to go uphill. And that's all I ever experienced as a light infantryman fighting in Afghanistan. But the survival of people taken a little bit off the top, and this really becomes a problem when young soldiers can't trust their officers and their leaders. Sadly, we would be present for pay, and the soldiers would get pay, but the battalion would take a cut of the soldiers' pay, and then the company commander would take a cut of the soldiers' pay, and then the platoon leader would take a cut of the soldiers' pay, and then the soldier would finally get paid. And to see that in action is just horrible. And in talking to them and advising them, look, that's not the way you want to build trust and morale and things. That's just the way it was. It was just the way it was. Again, it wasn't corruption. It was this is the way it is. This is the culture. And so you have to be careful when you're trying to impress Western values on another culture, especially when you're trying to transform their military. A lot of militaries in the world do not have a robust non-commissioned officer corps, such as what we have in the United States Army and in a lot of European armies. But definitely the Russians don't have an established non-commissioned officer corps. They have privates that have been in the Army for so long that they now are a sergeant, but they're not empowered to do anything. And the same thing is true in Afghanistan. So, similarly, as we were teaching, the U.S. Army doctrine, the same thing was happening in Iraq a number of years later when ISIS or ISIL, depending upon who you talk to, was marching towards Baghdad, getting an immediate call for military trainers to come out and teach MDMP, military decision-making process. And I was part of that decision, and as I was talking to the U.S. Army Central Command commanding general, I said, "It's too late. It's too late to teach them. And we can go teach them MDMP, but if we've been teaching them for 20 years and they haven't gotten it yet, jumping in at the last second just as they're about to fall and teaching them MDMP is not going to work. I mean, it's too late." And so I think that is kind of what happened, is that we left them too late, and we'll get into that a little bit further. But this is just my experience in Afghanistan when I was there from 2007 to 2008, again as an embedded military advisor in RC South. But to continue on with the history lesson, the hunt for Osama bin Laden continued for years, and he was eventually located and killed by U.S. Navy SEALs in Abbottabad, Pakistan on May 2nd, 2011.
Drawdown and transition to Afghan control. Over the years, the United States began a gradual drawdown of its forces in Afghanistan, transferring security responsibilities to the Afghan National Security Forces. In 2014, the combat role of the United States and coalition forces officially ended, shifting to a train, advise, and assist role. This was marked by the end of OEF and the initiation of Operation Freedom's Citadel. Taliban resurgence and United States agreement. Despite efforts to stabilize the country, the Taliban continued to reign territory and power throughout the late 2010s. On February 29, 2020, the United States and the Taliban signed an agreement in Doha, Qatar, setting the stage for a full U.S. withdrawal. The pact included stipulations about the intra-Afghan negotiations and assurances from the Taliban not to harbor terrorist groups threatening the United States or its allies.
Well, this brings us to the end of U.S. presence. Despite the Doha Agreement, violence continued, and U.S. troops started their final withdrawal in 2021. The Taliban rapidly captured territory. By August 15, 2021, the Taliban had taken control of Kabul, making a definitive end to the U.S.-backed government's rule. On August 26, 2021, during the massive evacuation efforts from Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul, a suicide bombing occurred on the Abbey Gate at the airport. This attack was one of the deadliest incidences in U.S. forces in the entirety of the Afghanistan conflict. 13 U.S. service members were killed. This included 11 Marines, 1 Navy corpsman, and 1 Army soldier. These service members were actively assisting the evacuation of American citizens, Afghan allies, and others seeking to leave Afghanistan after the rapid takeover of the country by the Taliban. Over 150 Afghan civilians were also killed in this blast, and many more were wounded. On August 30th, 2021, 2 years ago today, the last U.S. military flight left Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport, officially ending America's longest war. While Operation Enduring Freedom formally ended in 2014 and transitioned to Operation Freedom Sentinel, the broader conflict in Afghanistan and the U.S. involvement spanned 2 decades. The consequences and ramifications of this conflict are complex and have impacted Afghan society, geopolitics, and foreign policy in many profound ways.
So, Barrett, what do you see as the main strategic, operational, and tactical problems with the withdrawal?
Well, first of all, we should not have pulled out like we did. And any of the military advisors that the Biden administration had, from the Department of Defense that were ignored, and or if they brought up the correct information and the Biden administration overrode that information, that was just the absolute failure right there. I'm currently bringing up a map here that has the 5 regional commands that were in Afghanistan, and you can see by the color codes, the Regional Command North is in the blue, Regional Command West is in the pink or fuchsia, Regional Command South is yellow, and Regional Command East is a little bit orange, and then center mass of Regional Command East is the lime green, and that's Regional Command Kabul. And so each of these 5 regions had countries that were responsible for them. So, for instance, the United States was responsible for RC East, and the British, the Canadians, and the Netherlands Norwegians were responsible for RC South, the Italians responsible for RC West, the Germans responsible for RC North, and the French were responsible for RC Kabul. To pull out of all of the regional commands at the same time was a huge strategic mistake. What should have happened is it should have been a phased withdrawal. And I know there's going to be somebody that was on the planning and saying, well, this was a phased withdrawal, but no, it wasn't. What should have happened is a regional command should have been evacuated, or half of a regional command should have been evacuated, or performed retrograde operations, and then seen what happened. If the Taliban were easily able to overrun the Afghan National Army forces, then we would be postured to be able to move in and retake that terrain and realize that they're not quite ready yet. They had the men, the weapons and equipment, but they didn't have the intestinal fortitude to stand up to the Taliban. And that was really unfortunate. But I think by collapsing early and having only one extraction route, one APOD, or aerial port of debarkation, which was the airport in Kabul, just created an effect that just killed the morale of the forces, and it just beyond sad to be able to see this not be a phased withdrawal, and to know all the villages that I went into and all the little girls that 2 years ago I had a conversation with somebody and I said, the worst thing is I know what's going to happen to them. I know what's going to happen. The Taliban gave assurances 2 years ago, and surprise, they lied. And they've rolled back education. They've rolled back working opportunities. NGO, non-governmental organizations that are providing aid. Those have gone away as well, and it's sad. It's absolutely sad, and the biggest problem that Afghanistan has was its obviously the conflict between the Taliban and the democratic elected government is all the resources that Afghanistan has. I'd be on patrol and go by a mountain that was literally bleeding rust. I mean, the mountain was rusting because of all of the iron ore that was in the mountain. And as far as opium production goes, I would have to say that the one thing that the Taliban has done is it has virtually eradicated all of the poppy fields in Afghanistan. So that's about the only. So it's made heroin worldwide harder to get. The prices are going up because obviously there's not any more being produced. But that's the only positive. The negative is truly the impact of all of the men, women, and children that don't want to be under Taliban rule. And it's really hard to defeat an enemy. You can destroy them. These are all military tactical tasks. You can contain them. You can interdict You can attack, you can destroy, but it's almost impossible to defeat an enemy, because not only does that mean that you are eliminating all of the combat power, but you're eliminating the will to fight, right? So even if there's just one person that still wants to fight and is just quiet, then it's just going to start breeding, the levels of warfare, starting out with latent and incipient insurgencies, moving on to guerrilla warfare, and then moving on to a war of movement. And when the Afghan army started collapsing and the Taliban started securing Afghan equipment that was donated by coalition forces, they were just able to continue to multiply their combat power and really turn that into a war of movement to finally collapse the government. However, it didn't have to be that way. And, the fact that we are now in the second anniversary of that botched withdrawal, it's just absolutely sad. But that concludes our segment covering the anniversary of this tragic day. Please stay tuned for our second segment after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second segment of Azimuth Podcast. I am Kimberly McNabb, and as always, I am joined by my husband, Barrett McNabb. In this segment, we will discuss the military recruiting shortage recently covered in the media.
While two of the services, the Marine Corps and the Space Force, are projected to meet their recruiting goals, the other services are not. For instance, the Army is projected to miss out on its recruiting goal by over 15,000 recruits. In 2022, a study by the Pentagon showed that 77% of young Americans do not qualify to join the military. The reasons listed were obesity, drug use and other crimes, and mental health issues.
But the shocking rate of people who do not qualify still does not fully explain as to why the military is failing to reach recruiting goals. For those who do qualify, many simply do not want to join. But why? Why are young people not wanting to defend our great nation? I have come up with 6 reasons. Number 1, young Americans are being taught from school and through culture to hate America. I mean, when you're constantly bombarded with the fact that America is so racist, so bigoted, so transphobic, why would you risk your life to fight for such a country?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kimberly. One of my favorite all-time quotes is by a British political economist, John Stuart Mill, and he said, "War is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of things. The decayed and degraded state of moral and patriotic feeling, which thinks that nothing is worth a war, is much worse. A man for which he has nothing which he is willing to fight, nothing which he cares more about than he does about his personal safety, is a miserable creature who has no chance of being free unless made and kept so by the exertions of better men than himself." I mean, it's a really a pointed question of why someone would want to join the military if they feel that the institution themselves are inherently racist. And it's really sad that the military has gotten that rap, as well as all of the systemic racism and institutional racism that is widely touted by a lot of the mainstream media. I mean, really, when you look at it, the military has been this bastion of hope, and the military has always had a really high esteem, especially ever since the Vietnam War. I mean, the Vietnam veterans were villainized when they came back from Vietnam, but really starting with Desert Storm, a lot of the patriotic, tying yellow ribbons around trees and parades, it really kind of changed the mindset of the military. So it's really weird to see this pendulum shift as it goes back to what we have going on. And I'm sad, but we need to find America's soul again and pride in our institutions.
Reason number 2, young Americans have spent maybe the last 2 to 3 of their formative years so overly worried about safety and having that prioritized above all else during the lockdowns due to COVID. And do you know what is less safe than the possibility of going to war?
Well, a lot of times, when you look at safety and when you look at sharing a foxhole with somebody, it's never comes down to, whether, gosh, I hope the politicians got this right, or I'm fighting for the politicians, or I'm fighting for, the American flag. The answer usually always boils down to I'm fighting for the guy that's next to me, and this is my battle buddy, and I'm going to fight to protect him. He's going to fight to protect me, and it's the safety issue. People really just need to understand that there are greater issues than themselves. If you think about it. Karl von Clausewitz, everybody calls him in the military Old Dead Carl. He has a book, and he talks about war is an extension of politics, fully realized. And so, it's it's an amazing thing that people have not understood, that having things that are greater than yourself is something that really needs to be looked at, and this nation is worth fighting for. And as a military veteran of multiple wars, I understand the threat and the loss that can happen. And but still, it's important to understand and keep our country strong and lead the world through strength. And having a fully equipped military is necessary for that.
Well, reason number 3, I believe there are many misconceptions about the military. For instance, not everyone goes to fight. Not everyone is in the infantry or on the front lines. You have mechanics, you have air traffic controllers, cooks, even PR specialists, recruiters, and even accountants. Now, Barrett, can you give us some misconceptions that you've encountered throughout your military career?
Yeah, one of the things, misconception, is that people in the military are stupid, and it's far from the truth. There are some extremely intelligent people that are in the military. One of the things when I was in ROTC. Before I'd gotten commissioned, I was in the library, one of the few times I was in the library, but I was in the library, and there was a section of old manuals, or not manuals, but old transcripts of Senate hearings concerning the XM1 tank. And this was in the mid-'70s, and the XM1 later became the M1 Abrams main battle tank. And when it was the XM1 and they were talking, the Army was briefing the senators over all the things that the tank was going to be able to do, and that it was going to have laser rangefinders, it was going to be able to take in barometric pressure, the curvature of the earth, the humidity, obscuration with thermal imaging and things like that, in order to get first round lethality when firing the main gun round. The senators said, are the American 18-year-olds going to be smart enough to be able to handle the M1 tank? Or at the time, again, it was called the XM1 during the confirmation hearings. And but the senators asked that question.
I think they should ask that of themselves.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, they asked the question and said, look, are American youth going to be intelligent enough to be able to operate this vehicle? And Atari had already come out. This is in the 70s, so we haven't gotten Nintendo yet, but we're starting to see that they're the usage of video games is exponentially just helping, because a lot of this stuff it's like a video game, but still the misconception is that the people that join the military aren't smart enough. But you have people that are, again, they're air traffic controllers, they're having to calculate, time of flight for artillery. And imagine a young company commander who is, having an assault on an objective, and he has his calling in 155 artillery, which has a burst radius, and making sure that you're outside of the blast zone. And as you get closer to the objective, you shift that 155 artillery off, and you call in the battalion mortars. And then as you get closer, you come in and you use the company's 60 millimeter mortars, and you're determining what the risk estimated distance is of, if your troops are going to get hurt. Then you have the surface danger areas, or the SDZs, for the machine guns as you're doing beating, fire and creating beating zones over the objective. And then you have a helicopter that is an Apache that's just outside line of sight, and is going to be firing 30 millimeter main gun rounds into the objective area. And then, oh, by the way, you have an F-16 that's orbiting, 5 miles away, that's going to come in and drop ordnance. So you have to time the flight of the artillery round as it's making its arc in the air. So turn that off so the aircraft can come in, drop their ordnance, and then turn the artillery back on, all while being shot at. And you're doing advanced trigonometry on the fly. So I mean, it's it's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of math, and you have to be able to do it composed. The people that are operating the radars, for the Patriot missile batteries and the THAAD, people that are nuclear engineers that are making sure that the nuclear power plants inside aircraft carriers and submarines are operating. I mean, these are smart young men and women that are able to do this, and it's a shame that people think that soldier, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians are dumb. I mean, even Stephen King, the famed horror thriller novelist, said you need to make sure you study in school and be smart, or else you're going to have to go into the military. And now he retracted those comments after he was kind of slapped across the face over social media. But still, I mean, he said it. And John Kerry said something similar, and the Congressional Liaison Office pulled all of their military staffers from him when he was a senator, because he had made those comments. And so the DOD said, look, if you feel that way, then we're not going to staff your office with the military liaison officers. He didn't get them back until, I want to say it was 2010 or 2011 is when he finally got military staffers back over the comments that he had made. But you should be proud. I mean, the military is a brilliant force, and we're going to get into some things where I think it's being weakened and can be improved. But still, I mean, when we think about this, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions.
After hearing all that, I think I'll stick to tax returns. Reason number 4, people have been raised in an era of self-esteem. Me first. What do I feel like doing today? What is my truth? And how do I get more likes on social media? And, when you're in the military, all that goes out the door. It is mission first. It is supposed to be mission first, because you know what? ISIS doesn't care what your Instagram feed looks like. They just want you dead.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, one of the biggest things is selfless service, and putting yourself behind the mission, behind the unit, behind your nation, and putting those things first. Doing this and saying, this is me. The Army's gone through a number of recruiting slogans. Mm-hmm. Their most famous one, and it was people all over the world remembered it. It was "Be all you can be," and the Army changed it to an army of one. And the common misconception, even within the Army, because the Army did not do a good job of explaining the Army of One concept.
Sounds
great.
like a one-man team.
Yeah, it's a one-man team, and it really, was misunderstood by both the public and the Army and the soldiers in the Army as well. And really, what it seemed like, well, great, now we're just about me. And that's not really what it was about. It was about the old story from ancient Greece and a city-state that was fairly close to Sparta was being attacked, and they wanted to enlist the Spartans to help them out. And so Sparta sent a warrior to the city-state and started training them in the ways of Spartan warfare. And they said, well, great, we're so happy that you're here, but when are the Spartans going to be here? And, to help us. And he said, they'll be coming soon. And so he kept training, taking shields, slamming them against trees, and practicing with spears. Kept training, and then they said, look, this is really awesome, but when is the Spartan army going to be here? And the Spartan warrior said, they'll be coming soon. And just kept repeating all of the things, and then all of a sudden, it was the Spartan army was there, because he made them into Spartans. And so it wasn't that they needed to have 10,000 people from Sparta come and be their army. He trained them as an army of one to train them to be their own protectors. And so he created the Spartan army in that city-state. And that was a missed opportunity for the Army to really explain why that is. But, the world is a dark place. And if you look around and watch the news, it's not going to go far before you come across an article where there's human trafficking, where there is drugs, where there's violence, where there's children being killed and abducted, where there obviously we have a full-on high-intensity conflict war in Ukraine. So the world is a really dark place. And you need to understand that if you're not cognizant of your place in the world, you're going to get lost and you're going to get swallowed up. And that's something that I think we're having a lot of distractions in the United States on the subjects of institutional racism and supposed institutional racism and all of these problems. And other countries do not have that problem. They're focusing on something else. And we need to be focusing on the bigger picture as well. And so, that's the big thing. And our children are just being indoctrinated, which is going to weaken us. I mean, it truly is going to weaken us.
Right. Number 5, we live in an era of demasculinizing men. We're not just demasculinizing men, we're feminizing men. And everything that is masculine is considered toxic. Men can't even speak to a woman. It's just wrong. Men have to get AI girlfriends, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I mean, I hear where you're coming from on that. I mean, I can understand that. Being in the military is tough. I mean, it truly is. And I remember as a young platoon leader in Korea as a second lieutenant. Some of my soldiers went out and got drunk and came back, and they missed an alert. And I really wanted to hammer them as far as punishment goes for missing the alert. It's not like they missed morning physical fitness or something like that. They missed an actual call out and a drill, for practicing defending against North Korea. So it was an actual alert where we drew weapons and occupied battle positions and things like that. And so, but they missed it. So I really wanted to hammer them with UCMJ punishment at the company commander level. And my company commander said, yes, we're gonna punish them, but we're not gonna hammer them because these men are killers. these men are killers, and we don't want them to stop and smell roses and flowers along the way. These are tough men. And one of my other favorite quotes is from Teddy Roosevelt, and said, America sleeps well at night because Americans know rough men stand ready to commit violence upon their behalf. And, that's the thing. That's the attitude that you need to have. There was a poster when I was in Korea, and it was a black and white poster, and it had a few North Korean soldiers postered on it, and they're skinny. And it says, these men go to sleep on a cold wooden floor, and they receive a bowl of rice and 2 fish heads for their daily subsistence. They go to bed cold, wet, tired, and hungry, and hating your guts. What have you done to prepare for their arrival? Okay, so you want to talk about somebody that's hard. You want to talk about ISIS and ISIL training, and the training those people go through, the mental toughness to be a suicide bomber. There's I'm not saying that's what the U.S. military needs to be, is a bunch of suicide bombers, but the mental toughness is lacking, and I think some of that is that men can't be men. I think I saw a social media post of a video, and there was a woman that was complaining. She was in her 20s. She was complaining that why can't liberal men be more masculine? And that's a great question that she is pontificating on. But anyway, I think men need to be tougher. We need to embrace masculine natures. Men are bigger, stronger. We're designed for warfare. We're designed for hunting. We're designed for protecting, and we need to make sure that we're adhering to that.
And let's not get caught up on trigger words like toxic.
Right.
It's just natural. And some people blame the recruiting problems on woke ideology, and the military now has trans spokespeople in the Navy and DEI programs. And if someone wants to join the military, I'm not sure that this will deter them, because places to work that do not have DEI programs seem to be harder and harder to find. However, some people who want to join the military have relatives who served, and when those people who served hear about these DEI programs, they may discourage the young people from joining themselves.
Yeah, it's a great conversation to have. I think in the news you're seeing that Republicans are saying that the part of the reason that that there's a lack of recruitment is because of woke policies in the military, and the Secretary of the Army. Recently in a congressional hearing, Christine Wormuth, who's never served in the military, any branch.
That's not a job requirement.
It's not a job requirement, but she's been a career civil servant, and has never served in any branch of the military. And I'm beyond positive, in all of her years, I'm sure someone gave her a helmet and said, go out in the field and walk around for a little bit, and shake people's hands. But people just don't know who she is. I mean, the Army had a commercial, recruiting commercial, because they've brought back Be All You Can Be, but they've kind of stood it on its head. And in the commercial, it has people talking. And, they have military uniforms on, including the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Command Sergeant Major of the Army, and has various officers enlisted and non-commissioned officers. But 2 or 3 times she pops up and has a sentence to read, and she's in civilian clothes and nothing. I mean, I'm beyond positive people are like, who's that? And, it would have been so much better if they had just had a little tagline, Army Secretary Wormuth on the bottom there, but it's just kind of comical. But the Secretary Austin, who's the Secretary of Defense, very first thing that he did when he was appointed and took over the job is he had a stand down, a military-wide, department-wide DoD stand down to go ferret out right-wing extremists, right? And so now you've got people that watch Fox News, and you've got people looking over their shoulder and say, is he a right-wing extremist? I mean, you can't have a political position. For some reason, I did not see a stand down, and I may have missed it, but I didn't see a stand down by Secretary Austin to have a stand down and look for socialists and communists. On the other end of the spectrum. So he did a stand down looking for reactionary individuals, but he didn't do a stand down for radical individuals. Right. And what's good is for the good is good for everybody. And the military has always been cognizant of people that have joined the military. I mean, there's people that join the military for nefarious reasons. So you've got gangs that want to receive military training, right. And so they'll have some of their gang members go into the military to be an infantryman and to learn tactics, techniques, and procedures, and then they do their 4-year enlistment and they come back and teach that to the other gang members. I mean, it does happen. The same thing for right and left-wing extremists as well. And so part of the intake process is photographing and cataloging tattoos. And I remember that being at physical fitness training, and this is as I was even retiring as a major, we had it was a group of 50 people that were doing PT, and everybody said, hey, who has tattoos? And anybody that had tattoos had to strip off and get them cataloged. And they're obviously looking for extremist type of tattoos. But still, the Army already does that, and the military already does that. We have mandatory training that we have to do, sexual harassment, equal opportunity, things like that. But to do a safety stand down day just to look for one particular group, I think was a little excessive. And the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is General Charles Brown, and he's been nominated. Obviously, all nominations for military personnel are being held up in the Senate, but he straight up said that he hires and promotes for diversity. Okay, so how does that help morale, knowing that if you are a light-skinned service member, that a dark-skinned service member is going to get a promotion over you, just by the virtue of hiring for and promoting for diversity. And it's a problem. It's truly a problem, because I've had specific instances where I've talked to 3 dark-skinned soldiers that are leaving the military because of it's changed and because of the wokeness, and they're what is supposedly why these things are in place in order to make things easier, and it is decreasing morale all over the place. We have a military bases that are being renamed to counter any vestige of the Civil War. But I'm sorry, $65 million to rename military installations, that could have gone to improving base housing and getting rid of mold in barracks, which it's absolutely despicable. The amount of suicides that are in the military, and specifically in the Army, and even more specifically in Alaska, that money could have gone to hiring more psychiatrists, psychologists, more mental health professionals, but instead, just renaming military bases. $65 million. I'm so sorry, but I will always say that as an infantryman and a paratrooper, I was born at Benning and I grew up at Bragg. And that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. But, I'm just, kind of sick of this. It's people are demoralized. And the more that you highlight a difference, I think it becomes...
That's all people see.
Yeah, it exacerbates the problem. It literally exacerbates the problem. What the military should be focused on is the warrior ethos. Mm-hmm. It should not be focused on, DEI. If we ever go to war with China, and
they do not care what we look like.
They don't care what we look like. And it's not gonna be, well. Oh, wait a second. This brigade we're facing, it's got 20% of this particular group of people, 12% of this group of people, 70%. This is a really diverse unit. This one we're going to let pass by. We're not going to fight this one.
We're going to lessen our firepower by 70%.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to do that. The adversaries don't care. What we need to be focusing on is the mental toughness to have a soldier who is shot and is crawling over the body of the enemy and shoving a bayonet into their chest between the second and third ribs and twisting and inhaling their soul as the enemy breathes out their last breath. Okay, those are the people that we need in the military, and those are the things that we need to be focusing on. And I'm sorry. I mean, war is a violent business, and I've personally seen God on the battlefield, and I've personally seen what happens when God forgets to pay attention. Okay, so it is truly important to understand that we need tough men and women. I'm talking to women out there too. We need tough men and women. But we need to make sure everybody is doing their part.
Absolutely. And for the final reason I came up with is even if someone does qualify, loves America, and feels called to serve, how can someone stand up and do what is right when we live in a society in which we punish the bravest of brave? The bravest who should be celebrated, like Daniel Penny, who stood up for the safety of his fellow subway passengers in New York City. So, Barrett, you have often told me that in the Army, don't just bring up problems if you don't have solutions.
Right.
So, I've come up with some solutions. 1, the military needs to increase programs to help people get in shape to meet the standards.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Army has started to do that over the past few months. They have, it's kind of been nicknamed Fat Camp, but we don't need to belittle that. But a lot of the youth today can't meet the height and weight standards, and so there's that, and then. So it helps them get into shape and to be able to. I don't know if they have to pass the physical fitness test by the end of it, but I think it gets them really close to passing the physical fitness test, which they'll practice more on. But I think there's a minimum standard in order to get into basic training, and then also. The ASVAB, a lot of people, the can't pass the ASVAB, which is the mental test to see where you are mathematics wise and sorting and so
with our bad schools.
Yeah, so I mean it's showing the bad schools have a lot of second and third order effects. So when we see studies that kids are not able to read at an 8th grade level or 9th grade level, there are lots of second and third order effects of that. That means that people have difficulty getting in the military because again, there's not a lot of dumb people in the military. And now there's a lot of people that do stupid things, and we've
That's
told
everywhere.
Yeah, we've told some of those stories, and we'll continue to tell some of those stories from my experience. But on the by and by, you need to have somebody that is smart and can handle all the electronics and the radios and and GPS and computers and things like that. So having people get in shape, and then also having mental toughness and improving their mental. Now something that I just recently read is that the Army is considering letting calculators be used in the ASVAB. And I really think that defeats the purpose. I think lowering the standard is not the way to go.
Battlefield. Hold on, my battery and my calculator's dead.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that is not the way to go. I think having programs where they get additional education is much better than giving a calculator and lowering the standard. Getting people to the standard is ideal, and obviously you want people to exceed the standard. You don't ever want anybody that just does the bare minimum, but the bare minimum is there for a reason, because we need people to be able to shoot, move, and communicate, and all of those things. So I think lowering the standard and having the calculators, bad call.
Absolutely. Solution number 2. I think in some instances we could reconsider medical exclusions. I saw an article that said needing an inhaler can get one excluded. I mean, we know tons of people that need an inhaler, and if you're an accountant behind the desk or a mechanic, I think that's okay. But if you're on the front lines, then yes, absolutely, you should not need an inhaler.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
So I'm gonna disagree with you on this one, and that's okay. We can disagree. The reason that the behind the desk thing, everybody needs to be deployable. Everybody truly needs to be deployable because push comes to shove, everybody's a soldier first, everybody's a Marine first, or the Marines say everybody's a rifleman. That's there, and so everybody needs to be able to fight. If you're on a supply convoy and your convoy gets attacked, you need to be able to return fire effectively. You need to be able to, again, the physical fitness standards don't change whether you're an infantryman or a member of the band, or a cook. You still have tasks that you need to do. A 12-mile foot march once a quarter with a 35-pound ruck. You have to, I think it's once or twice a year, you have to do the nuclear, biological, chemical training or subburn training, where you go and test your gas mask and get CS gassed. I think either 1 or 2 times a year. There's a lot of minimum standards that everybody need to qualify with your weapon, whether it's a pistol or a rifle. But having these minimum standards so that everybody is deployable. And so the inhaler, if you have
I'm talking minor things.
Sure. But like asthma, needing an inhaler, if you can't get the medicine for deployed, you could have a problem. But I get some of your point on, I'm getting hung up on the inhaler, but there's some things that just can't be excluded. So for instance, when I was a cadet in ROTC, there was the opposite problem of what we have now. And I was going through advanced summer field training, which is up at Fort Lewis, Washington, and they had too many cadets. There was going to be 2,500 too many second lieutenants. The Army had looks at what the force needs, 5-10 years out to shape the force. And this is in 1997, so Desert Storm had happened in 91. And so the Army cut a number of divisions from the military. They went down to 10 divisions. And so there were too many cadets. And so they said, look, had got all the cadets in a auditorium, and they said, look, we need 700 of you, or 20, I think it's 2,500 of you to leave and not get commissioned. Do we have any volunteers? And everybody kind of looked around and was like, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna volunteer to do that. Yeah, not it. And so then they spiced it up a little bit, and they said, okay, check it out. If you volunteer to not get a commission, your scholarship, it's on us. So all the school we paid for, it's free. You don't have to do any service commitment. You don't have to pay it back. The scholarship on us. And there were a lot of people that looked around and were like, I'll do that. And so they stood up and they got their school paid for free. And did not have to do any military service. And so what a great gig. And so, but there were a lot of people that didn't, leave. And so they said, okay, this is the deal. We will give no waivers for any reason whatsoever during this 6.5 week long training exercise. And what it is you go through ROTC your freshman, sophomore, or junior year, and then you go to the advanced summer field training, and it's a 6.5 week long exam. It's a field land navigation, basic rifle marksmanship, physical fitness, leadership, combat missions, and you get a score at the end of it out of 1,000 points, and that score gets tallied into your GPA and things like that. And so you actually get ranked from the best cadet in the United States to the worst cadet in the United States through all the school ROTC programs. And at the time, the top third got active duty, the middle third got reserves and National Guard, and the bottom third, they kind of split that into the three again, and that top third kind of got some National Guard and reserves, and then the rest, didn't get a commission whatsoever. So they said, look, we're not going to get a waiver at all. Physical fitness, you fail a PT test, you're out, and then you owe the money. So you have to pay us back. So if you get kicked out for any reason, you'll have to, you didn't get a commission and you didn't take us up on getting your scholarship paid for. So now you owe us the money. And wow, I mean that's pretty rough. So I was non-scholarship. My school was so inexpensive, ridiculously inexpensive. It was $900 a semester for 15 hours of classes, and so I didn't take the money because I knew somebody else probably needed the money, and so I was non-scholarship, so I wouldn't have to pay anything back. But I got to the medical portion of the in processing. So you had to go through, get a medical evaluation, and so my eyes were horrible. They were absolutely horrible. So I was legally blind, and I had work contacts and/or glasses, but I could not see the big E. Even at 21 years old, I couldn't see the big E. So I definitely relied upon my glasses. Now I had already been to airborne school and air assault school. So the Army had invested a significant sum of money into me as a cadet already, and I failed the eye exam. And so I had to go see a specialist, and the specialist, medical doctor, said, look, we're not giving any waivers. There's no waivers for anything. And I pleaded my case, and I said, I understand what you're getting at and why it could be a concern, but I've already been through airborne school. I've already been through air assault school. My vision has never been a problem. I want to be an infantry officer. I carry multiple pairs of glasses. Teddy Roosevelt did the same thing. I think he carried like 20 pairs of glasses all over his body in case he broke a pair. He could whip.
When you retired, you had like 6 pairs.
Yeah, I had 6 pairs of glasses. So I carried glasses all over my body.
And our children broke every single pair.
They did. They sure did. But so anyway, she wrote me a permanent waiver for my vision. And it's in my medical records, and it shouldn't have happened. So there is an instance where I can get on board with you that I got it if I'd not been.
Yeah, I'm talking minor stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, the vision is. I personally think it's minor. I mean, everybody can wear glasses, and oh, by the way, this is before everybody was getting LASIK and stuff like that. So, but still, I got a permanent waiver, and so if there is that kind of problem, then I can get on board with that. I can.
All right. Number 3, in schools, we need to stop teaching everyone to hate America teach civics, put some patriotism back in the classrooms.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm going to expand upon that a little bit,
Okay.
and I think in the home as well.
Absolutely.
I think in
Our
the home.
4- and 6-year-old, they know how to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yep. I'm very, very proud of my wife. She has them recite the Pledge of Allegiance every single day,
Mm-hmm.
and they pray before they go to bed. And I think it's important. It's important to have pride in yourself and pride in your nation. And there is a difference. There's a difference between the mortal sin of pride
Well, absolutely.
and
not
having
being ashamed.
not being ashamed of your country. So I'm not talking about the mortal sin. I'm talking about being proud of being an American and being proud of all of the great and wonderful things that the United States has done and is going to do. Now, are there some dark times in the United States? Yes, there were, and there's no excuse for it. But the thing is you cannot always look back and say that is the biggest problem. You have to look forward. You have to have pride in yourself. It needs to, as you said, needs to be in the schools, but it needs to be at home as well.
Absolutely. Solution number 4. We should put more junior ROTC programs in schools. I read online that there are some 3,000 junior ROTC programs, and allowing military service members to come to schools to inform students and clear up any misconceptions that students may have. And they would really educate young people about the military, because not everyone's familiar what the military is really like.
Yeah, I agree. And I do know that it was a Supreme Court case and it was ruled, but there's a federal law that all the military recruiters have access to public schools.
Okay.
So a public school system is not allowed to turn away a recruiter. Okay. Now, again, it's like during career fairs and college fairs and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not talking about a recruiter coming in and sitting down next to you in your physics class. It's like when you have college day and things like that. You know, having the military set up a booth. It's a federal law that has to be allowed for public schools. So private schools, they're not receiving federal funding. And so they're kind of immune to that, but really the junior ROTC program, similar to the Boy Scouts, and the Girl Scouts, teaches you how to be a great American, and how to have pride in yourself, have military bearing, being able to work together as a team, being able to be a good contributor to society. And, it's important. Not everybody that goes through JROTC goes into ROTC. And
there's no obligation.
Yeah, there's no obligation. But it does teach you how to be a really good American, and I highly recommend it.
And solution number 5, we as a society need to make men again. I personally do not believe anyone, whether you're female, male, black, white, etc., if you are just respectful, you do not deserve to live in fear of being as God made you to be.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there. I mean, the biggest thing is there is no black, white, Latino. It's you're a soldier with a capital S. You're a soldier.
Yep. And
it's green. And if you're in the Army, it's blue. If you're in the Marine Corps, it's red. When I said earlier, dark-skinned soldiers and light-skinned soldiers, that's actually in the manuals. And the reason that you even have that differentiation is because things like cold weather injuries, if you have darker skin, the injury looks different than if you have light skin, right? And so you need to be able to
treat it.
Be able to know how to treat it. But again, it's it's not black, it's not white, it's not brown. That doesn't matter. it doesn't matter. It's when you cut everybody open, they need to bleed true blue, right? True blue American, because we're all Americans. And the United States does allow non-citizens to be in the military, green card holders and things like that, and you get an expedited path to citizenship if you do successful military service. But those people are aspiring to be Americans. So you have Americans and people that are aspiring to be Americans, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the fact that a lot of these DEI programs really kind of pit people against each other,
yes,
and it does the opposite of what you think it does. It creates resentment. It just care about each other. If we all just cared about each other more, I think we would be a lot more successful.
Absolutely. And reason number 6, we need to bring merit back. We should not be cutting standards to achieve some arbitrary goal. It is an insult to those who have earned it, who have met the standards. And you'll have a hard time keeping those people in the military, and you've also lowered goals for people to aspire to.
Yeah, the lowering of standards, I mean, if you are not practicing shooting, moving, and communicating, and that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what branch of service you're in. The recent Marine amphibious ship fire that burned out in California. It was a deliberate act of sabotage, but still, the sailors weren't able to put the fire out, right? Because they had skipped firefighting training and were behind on their firefighting training for who knows what. If it was DEI, then shame on the Navy. The Navy keeps hitting ships and hitting the ground, like barrier reefs and stuff like that, and hurting ships. And the lack of station keeping and sea navigation is clearly lacking. And I'm not just going to pick on the Navy. The Army has they've come up with their new physical fitness test, and not enough women were passing it. And so Congress went back to the Army and said, "Hey, you got to change the standards so that more women can pass."
I would be mad if I worked my butt off to meet the standard, and then someone who's doing half as much gets to do the same stuff I get to do.
Yeah, it's absolutely just inconceivable. I mean, in the Air Force, the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Joanne Bass, has said that the lack of standards in the Air Force is really raising an alarm. And Russia and China,
laughing.
They're laughing, and she said specifically, second best won't cut it. And so, I mean, you have people that are brave enough to stand up and say, look, these leaders need to stop playing funny games and really kind of get after what we need to. And again, it just comes down to that warrior ethos. I mean, it's your buddy to the left and the right, doesn't matter if you're male or female, but you need to have the standard, and you shouldn't lower the standard. And I was a company commander in officer candidate school at Fort Benning, and the motto was standards, no compromise. And that's the thing, is you can exceed the standard all you want, but you need to have the standard, and lowering it in order to get a larger group of people to be able to cover the task it's not gonna cut it.
Nope. Solution number 7. Military bases and infrastructure are in desperate need of repair. Military members are frustrated with infrastructure and housing on bases. This lowers morale, and they tell their friends and family, and this can further discourage those who may possibly want to join.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the $65 million, how it could have been spent, in a better way. But I'll just say it again. I mean, changing the names of bases versus getting rid of mold in the barracks, which is a health hazard. I mean,
and our soldiers deserve better.
yeah, they deserve better. They absolutely deserve better. And whenever a news story like this breaks, it's always like, oh, we're going to take care of this. Get ahead of the problem. Get ahead of the problem. Do inspections. Fix the stuff, and just get it done. Morale. One of the big things that's happened is looking at the instances of sexual assault in the military, and it's on the rise. And I don't know if it's on the rise because victims or survivors are reporting it more, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. But one of the biggest things that I think for women is they have taken the UCMJ authority away from commanders, and they've given it to the judge advocate general and the special investigators that just do sexual assault. And so I think in the past, not every time, but there were commanders that would choose not to punish people because old Sergeant Go Lucky is a good dude, and so he said, she said, they both drinking. Well, it doesn't matter. So anyway, it's been yanked away from the commanders, so it's no longer part of their UCMJ responsibility, and it immediately has gone to special organizations inside the DoD that prosecute this. And I think that will have a huge effect on female morale because. Again,
they hear these high rates.
Yeah, these high rates, and we're all battle buddies, and so we need to make sure that we're not going to hurt each other because we're all on the same team. We need to make sure that we fight and communicate together, and we have each other's back.
Now, Barrett, do you think we should ever go back to the draft?
That's a great question. I mean, when the last time we had a draft was during the Vietnam War, and it was then we transitioned to the all-volunteer force. It would have to be a catastrophic event, I think. Many of you know, if you're a male, when you turn 18, you need to register for the selective service, and so we do have the roster of people that have registered. Now, one of the things that have gone back and forth through Congress was, should females also be required to register for the selective service, and it was struck down, so there is no requirement for that. But still, it's really kind of a break glass in case of emergency. I couldn't see it happen if it was another world war with Russia and China. I'm a retired Army officer, and so my DD 214 says, the first line says, subject to active duty recall by the Secretary of the Army indefinitely. So I could get recalled back into military service. I really don't think that having the draft come back is a good thing. Again, it's truly would be break glass in case of emergency.
Well, that concludes this segment, and please stay tuned after these messages. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in. Hello, and welcome to our third segment of Azimuth Podcast. Now, we will continue our presidential candidate series, and today we are focusing on Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida and a presidential candidate for the upcoming 2024 election. I am Kimberly McNabb, and I am joined by my husband, Barrett McNabb.
We're so excited to have you once again. Let's discuss Ron DeSantis' candidacy, his strengths and his weakness. He's definitely been making headlines lately.
So Ron DeSantis, the current governor of Florida, announced his candidacy for the 2024 presidential election on May 24th. And right now, we will watch his announcement.
Our border is a disaster. Crime infests our cities. The federal government makes it harder for families to make ends meet, and the president flounders. But decline is a choice. Success is attainable and freedom is worth fighting for. Righting the ship requires restoring sanity to our society, normalcy to our communities, and integrity to our institutions. Truth must be our foundation, and common sense can no longer be an uncommon virtue. In Florida, we proved that it can be done. We chose facts over fear, education over indoctrination, law and order over rioting and disorder. We held the line when freedom hung in the balance. We showed that we can and must revitalize America. We need the courage to lead and the strength to win. I'm Ron DeSantis, and I'm running for president to lead our great American comeback.
Well, he is no stranger to the political scene, having served as the governor since January 2019. And prior to that, he represented Florida's 6th congressional district in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Now, DeSantis' record as governor has drawn attention, especially with his response to the coronavirus pandemic. He made headlines by lifting many restrictions earlier than other governors, which sparked both praise and criticism.
And more recently, DeSantis has received criticism for several policies. For instance, he signed a bill banning the teaching of critical race theory in public schools, and he has been known for his strong stance against what he calls woke ideology.
It's clear that DeSantis has been positioning himself as a conservative candidate, but that comes with both strengths and weaknesses. Let's start by discussing his strengths.
One of DeSantis' strengths lays in his communication style. He is known for addressing issues head-on and discussing solutions rather than just listing problems or attacking opponents. This straightforward approach could resonate well with voters who only want to hear practical solutions.
And his record as governor is another strong point. Florida's business-friendly environment increases in teachers' salaries, and his focus on workplace development and training programs showcase his commitment to the state's economic growth and education system.
In addition, he also secured significant funding for Everglades restoration as governor, which appeals to voters concerned about environmental conservation. In addition to the normal amount of stress in a presidential campaign, potential voters will also see how DeSantis responds to Hurricane Idalia later this week. While some of the other candidates' only job is to be a candidate for the presidency, DeSantis is still performing his duties as governor. He left the campaign trail this week to attend to the shooting spree in Jacksonville and for the upcoming Hurricane Idalia crisis. He said, "You've got to put the interest of the people first. I mean, there's no time. There's a place." Sorry, I messed up.
Okay, start over again.
Okay.
Start at the quote.
You've got to put the interest of the people first. I mean, there's a time and a place to have political season. We have a responsibility as Americans to come together and do what we can to mitigate any damage and to protect the people. So that's what I have done on all these different issues, and that's what I will continue to do. When you have these situations, you've got to step up. That sounds like real leadership to me.
Yep. However, with strengths come weaknesses. Some critics have pointed out that DeSantis can sometimes come across as robotic in his speech delivery, as in the GOP debate last week, which could affect his ability to connect with voters on that personal level. In our coverage of the first GOP debate, you will hear our criticisms and recommendations for Governor DeSantis on the campaign trail.
And there have been some questionable decisions, like his campaign announcement on Twitter, which had sound issues, as well as dropping off thousands of viewers on Twitter, now known as X, and laying off a third of his staff last month. These actions have raised speculation about fund management and management skills.
Another potential challenge for DeSantis is his stance on certain issues, like abortion and education. His signing of the bills restricting abortion and limiting discussions on gender identity and sexual orientation in schools might not sit well with all voters, including independents.
And while he has strengths in his economic policies, focusing too much on the culture wars, such as with Disney, might lead some voters to perceive him as less interested in addressing the rising cost of living and other economic challenges. And let's not forget the 800-pound gorilla in the Republican room, Donald Trump, who tends to suck the oxygen in the room. Supporters wonder how any Republican candidate can get out from his shadow and shine. We saw that in the first GOP debate. When questioned about January 6, 2021, DeSantis said that we need to focus more on the future, not the past, only to be tied back down by Bret Baier, reminding him that the Republican base does want to talk about the past.
That's a great point. It's clear DeSantis has both strengths and weaknesses, and as the campaign season progresses, it'll be interesting to see how he navigates these challenges. As always, it's essential for voters to consider a candidate's entire record and approach when making their decision.
Well, that wraps up our discussion of Ron DeSantis' presidential candidacy. Thank you for joining us today on our podcast. Be sure to tune in next time for more thought-provoking conversations.
Thanks for listening, and have a great day.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.